Chapter 16, Part 2. That's right, Billy, Mr. Moon nodded. Listen to your uncle now. It's a hard life, isn't it, Jim? Yes, it is, John, but it pays better here than in Wales. That it does, but I'm awful tired of the company's cheating ways. It's the cribbing I hate most of all, that and the prices at the company store. Did you know they raised the price of blasting powder again? And picks as well. If we buy our equipment in Charleston where it's cheaper, we get fired. What's cribbing? I asked the men. I knew all about the company store, and was bitter over its high prices like everyone else in town, but I hadn't heard the word cribbing before. Cribbing is how Mr. Newgate squeezes a bit more blood and money out of us miners, lad, said Mr. Moon. Last year he added a frame round the top of his coal car so they hold 4 tons now instead of 3, but does he pay us any more per car? No, lad, he pays us the same, as if we were only loading 3 tons a car instead of 4. But that's cheatin', I said. Of course it is, lad. Mr. Newgate calls it fair. He says we was filling the cars with slate and rubble when he's paying for coal. I'm telling you, Jim, a union would help us. We need the United Mine Workers here in Holly Glen. Now, John, be careful. Didn't Mr. Newgate say he'd send in the guards from the Baldwin Felts agency to evict any miner who supports the union? A miner was evicted down the road just a few years ago. A terrible thing it was, piped in Aunt Agnes. She joined the men on the porch, angry as I'd ever seen her, kicking a family out of their home in the middle of winter. That's why we need the union, said Mr. Moon. That's why we have to be quiet, John, and watch what we say and who we say it to, said Uncle Jim. We need to see what happens in the other mining towns along Paint Creek. I want to know how much the union is willing to help us before we start demanding things from Mr. Newgate. Aunt Agnes cut him off. Mind how you talk in front of Billy, you two. He'll be working in the mine before long. Now, Billy, you forget all about this. Not a shred of your storytelling nonsense about what you just heard. Don't say the word union to a living soul, and if folks ever try talking to you about it, act like you don't know what they mean. Do you hear me? Yes, ma'am, I said, and I meant it too. I could tell the union was a dangerous thing to discuss. Good. Now get in the kitchen and help me with the last of the washing. It was Friday, and Mr. Moon and my uncle talked long into the night. They started speaking in Welsh, so I don't know if they talked more about the union or Mr. Newgate. Whatever they were saying, it was passionate discussion. Mr. Moon slapped his hand on the arm of his chair more than once, and Uncle Jim smoked pipe after pipe while he rocked in his chair. For the time being, it was easy to forget what I heard about the union and the Baldwin Felts Guards, because I had plenty to think about. Neva Shyrock had told me the truth about the night I was born. Then there were 2 other things occupying my mind. One was hearing Uncle Jim say he'd be talking to the foreman soon and that finally I'd be getting a job in the mine. The other was a letter from Rufus that set me to worrying so bad I couldn't sleep at night. Seems he'd taken to spying at night whenever he heard that Mr. Calder was coming to dine. Just like I did, he'd sneak out in the dark and hide under the dining room window. You can imagine how scared I got hearing Mr. Beadle offering me to Mr. Calder to apprentice in his factory. Peggy heard it too while she was clearing their plates after supper, and we spoke about it the next day. She says the same thing you did, that it's no type of life for a boy. She's putting money and food aside and helping me plan how to run away to Albright, where I can hide out for a while until I figure out where to go next. So, Billy, this might be the last letter you get from me for a long time. Well, I got right quivery reading this letter and thinking about Rufus stealing away and hiding about in the night. It was over a year since I last saw him, but even so I couldn't imagine him being big enough to either work in the glassworks or take off on his own. Where'd he sleep at night? What would he do once the food ran out? I suppose he could always sneak back to the orphanage for a handout from Peggy. I knew she'd be good for it, but how Rufus could manage on his own I couldn't begin to figure. I thought about the Cheat River and how it took Meek. I wish there was some way Rufus could come here and make a home with Aunt Agnes, Uncle Jim, and me here in Holly Glen, but it was already too late to send word to him. He might be out in the dark wandering the very moment I read his letter. I fretted over Rufus for days until I figured there was nothing I could do except hope for his safety. I went back to practicing my whip, and finally, one day I managed to put out a flame and leave the candle still standing. It was early evening and the sun was still out. I called Aunt Agnes and Uncle Jim. "Look, I can do it now." I lit the candle and stepped back from it about 10 feet. I brought my arm back and snapped the whip. Crack! The very fringes of the tip brushed the flame and put it out just like that. A thin ribbon of blue smoke curled upward. I puffed up with pride. Aunt Agnes and Uncle Jim clapped for me. "There you go, lad. Congratulations. You're ready to meet the foreman," said Uncle Jim. "I'll take you to the mine with me tomorrow to see if he has a job for you. Now it's time to learn about your safety lamp. I bought one for you not long ago, and I best show you how to light it before your first day." The next morning I was awake before the mine whistle. I slung my whip over my shoulder, and Uncle Jim helped me hook my lamp on my cap. "Here you go," said Aunt Agnes, handing me my lunch pail. "I baked you a cherry pie." She looked me in the eye for a moment, and I could tell she wanted to tell me to be careful, only it weren't her manner to do so. We left the house, and she walked with us for a while, then clung back to talk with some of the other women. Clyde Light spied me and came tearing over. "Good to see you," he said. "I was wondering when you'd finally get here." The sun was coming up as we tramped up the mountain. Some of the Spraggers gave me a hard look and a smirk, and Clyde told them to steer off and keep to themselves. "This here's Billy Creekmore," he said, "and he's going straight to being a mule driver." "Sure he is," sneered one of them. "I'll be seeing you inside, Billy Creekmore." "Don't mind him. He's scared of the rats. Hate seeing him run through the mines. One of the boys tied a dead one to his lunch pail by its tail and scared him half to death." "You don't say. A big guy like that afraid of rats?" I said back. I couldn't admit that I hated rats myself. I hoped there weren't near as many rats running through the mine as I'd heard folks say. The foreman was at the entrance of the mine, checking in the miners, giving them their ID tags for the coal cars they'd fill, and waving hello. He was a secret-looking man with one side of his face twisted up. "Mr. Wheaton, this here's my nephew Billy Creekmore. He's ready to work in the mine now. Wants to be a mule skinner." "Most boys start out as trappers or spraggers in the mine." One of his eyes half shut, like he was taking aim at something with an invisible gun. He looked at me like I was a target, and I could tell he didn't like anything too out of the ordinary on his watch. "Yes, sir, it was that way in Wales, too. But Billy's talented with the whip, and he's been working old coppers for quite a while now. He's a clever boy, too, can learn a trade quick at his age, or older." Things didn't seem to be going my way, so I decided to pipe in. "Why, Mr. Wheaton, when I was only 10, I was all set to work in the glassworks, since I was known far and wide to be such a fast learner. Mr. Coulter was going to assign me straight away to the main furnace, but along came my uncle to have me live here in Holly Glen." Uncle Jim gave me a glance, but it seemed I did some good. "Well," said the foreman, "we can always use a good skinner. I'll give him a try." Then he whistled over another mule skinner the name of Clayton Nicewander, and told him I'd be following him about for the day. "Oh, will he, Mr. Wheaton? And will you be paying me extra for teaching the boy his trade? I'm sure I'll do it to your specifications, sir." He gave Mr. Wheaton a little bow, then spit some tobacco near his boots. Mr. Wheaton jumped back, but a little bit of tobacco juice hit his toe. He fixed on Clayton with his one open eye, all bright with meanness. "No, I won't be paying you extra, just like I didn't pay the boy extra who taught you, Clayton. Now get along, learn quick, Billy, and Clayton don't cause no trouble." Inside the mine, Clyde and Uncle Jim peeled off one way, and Clayton and I went another toward the stables. "Good luck," called Clyde. "We'll see you at the end of the day," said Uncle Jim. I'd never been inside the mine before. The ceiling was held up with rows and rows of timbers, which is nothing more than tree trunks stripped of bark and branches. The light of my lamp wouldn't let me see more than several feet ahead of me. Behind that was the deepest kind of darkness I'd ever been in. It was blacker than pitch, all velvety and thick, without no light of any kind. It was cold in there, too, and the sides of the tunnels was wet. I could hear water dripping into a pool, but where it was I couldn't tell. Worse than that was the sound of timbers creaking and groaning in the distance. "Is the mine caving in?" I asked Clayton. I was dreadful afraid all of a sudden. The startling sounds in fierce blackness all around me was making me right jumpety. "It will if they don't put up more timbers. That's coming from the old part of the mine. The roof's settling and squeezing 'em so bad they're splintering from the pressure. I'll take you to see 'em. It's quite a sight. Some look just like bent elbows. That part of the mine is near run out of coal now. The company's pushing the miners to get it out fast before the roof collapses." "Why don't they put in more timbers?" "'Cause the coal's almost gone and the company don't want to spend the money. Besides, the mine boss says there ain't no danger of a cave-in. Says all that creaking and splintering is just the mountain settling and nothing to worry about." Clayton laughed a bit, then took his whip off and cracked it into the dark. "Now don't start getting the cold shivers, Billy. You've only just begun."